Stormwind is the most iconic city in all of Azeroth, but many forget how much Stormwind has changed through the years, and with the developers saying in an interview that they're working on an update to the capital cities, there's never been a better opportunity to go back and look at the history and the evolution of the greatest city in all of Azeroth. There's very little known of Stormwind before the events of Warcraft 1. The little that we do know are from sources like the book, The Seven Kingdoms, that can be found in the same room as Commander Malor. This book simply describes how descendants of Arathi from the north passed the mountain of Khaz Modan and started a settlement called Stormwind, and that they called the southern region of Eastern Kingdom Azeroth. Very confusing naming from Blizzard. I could not find any more in-game sources for the events before Warcraft 1, but please let me know in the comments if you know a book or an item that talks about this time. It's often repeated that Stormwind was founded 1200 years before the First War, but the only source for this is a deleted tweet from 2014. However, there's much more that we can learn from external sources like the Chronicles and the book called The Last Guardian. In these books we learn that 75 years before the First War there was a Gnoll War where all the Gnolls united against Stormwind under their Gnoll leader Garfang. But through the efforts of Baratheon Bryn, the Gnoll leader was killed and the Gnoll packs were scattered and disorganized, therefore no longer a serious threat to Stormwind. And 18 years before the First War there was a Gurubashi War. Stormwind's expansion and growing influence made a great threat to the Gurubashi trolls, and after many conflicts and battle, it all came down to one moment when the trolls united and launched an assault on Stormwind. But this assault was short-lived, due to the fact that Stormwind was under Medivh's protection, so he absolutely decimated and destroyed the Gurubashi army, and weakened them to the point that they could never seek to compete with Stormwind again, so now they just hide away in Sol'Gurub. Before the First War, Stormwind was the jewel of Azeroth, a strong powerful city even greater than Dalaran. This brings us to the most important point in Stormwind's history, the First War.
In the Age of Chaos, two factions battled for dominance. The Kingdom of Azeroth was a prosperous one. Then came the Orcish hordes. My liege? My liege? Yes. Yes.
The Last Guardian, Medivh, corrupted by Sargeras, betrayed the world by opening a portal to Draenor, letting in hordes of orc into the Eastern Kingdom and starting the First War. Orcs quickly spread throughout the lands. After Brightwood, Westfall and the Red Ridge Mountain fell, a massive army of orcs marched onto Stormwind.
Stormwind Keep is ours to take! The Orcish hordes gather like buzzards to carrion as the moment of destiny is close at hand.
After Stormwind was encircled by the Orc army, led by Warchief Blackhand, the first assault started. With siege engines firing and thousands of Orc marching towards the city, it seemed that Stormwind would fall that very day. But Anduin Lothar with a group of knights sailed out of Stormwind and flanked the Orc army. And then the Stormwind gates opened and soldiers stormed out, attacking the Orc force from two fronts, destroying most of the army. But not long after the successful defense of Stormwind, an half-orc spy named Gorona assassinated King Lane in Stormwind Keep, and after his death, Stormwind was overrun by orcs and burned to the ground. Anduin Lothar took the few who survived and fled Stormwind as the city was being burned and destroyed by the orcs.
The once mighty army of Azeroth lay among the blackened and charred remains of Stormwind Keep. Those that escaped fled across the Great Sea, bringing tales of the suffering they had faced at the hands of the Orcish hordes.
During the Second War, the ruins of Stormwind were under control of the Bleeding Hollow clan, and following the Old Horde's defeat in the Second War, Stormwind was successfully reclaimed, and men once more returned to Stormwind, rebuilding the city from the ground up.
Gorefiend has sensed a focus of arcane energies within a castle that has been raised upon the foundations of Stormwind Keep.
Not all surrounding orcs were defeated when reclaiming Stormwind, and we can still see some orc-controlled areas like Stonewatch Castle to this very day. In time, Stormwind was reconstructed by the Stonemasons Guild, who were contracted by Stormwind's House of Nobles. They also named this version of Stormwind New Stormwind, but later they just called it Stormwind again. The House of Nobles was in huge debt due to the expenses rebuilding Stormwind, so they refused to pay the Stonemasons Guild, led by Edwin Van Cleef, who would later become the founder and the leader of the Defias Brotherhood. We learned this after defeating Van Cleef in the Dead Mines and delivering an unsent letter to Barrows Alexton, the city architect, and in the quest he confirms that Van Cleef was refused payment from the Stormwind nobles. After the Third War and the destruction of Lordran, Stormwind had become the last great city. As the northern kingdoms fall one after another and Gilneas locked itself away behind a wall, Stormwind was the only one that survived the plague, becoming the center and the heart of the Alliance. With the release of World of Warcraft, it was the first time that we can actually walk around and see Stormwind. Divided in different districts with different purposes, Stormwind had truly came to life as the capital of the Alliance. But in this version of Stormwind, you might notice that something is missing. You can't actually go to the infamous Stormwind Harbor. Instead, it's just a wall. But there's an in-game explanation for this. The official reason is that Stormwind is completely broke and they just cannot afford to repair the harbor after it was destroyed in the First War. But in reality, it's actually Lady Katrana Prestor, who is Onyxia, intentionally making sure that the city is broke and in chaos. Another thing you might notice in Classic is that there's a boy king. This is because King Varian Bryn was kidnapped by the Defias pirates on his way to Theramore, leaving his son Anduin on the throne. And King Varian Bryn would not return to Stormwind until the wrath of the Lich King. Lady Katrana Prestor used this opportunity to manipulate Anduin, High Lord Bolvar, and the Stormwind nobles to refuse aid to the surrounding towns, as confirmed by the messenger quests, who all mentioned that Stormwind denied any form of help, and therefore the only one who is left to help them is you, the player. They even go so far to say that the Stormwind monarchy has abandoned them. It ended with Marshal Windsor marching right into Stormwind Keep, using an ancient dragon rune to forcefully unmask Lady Katrana Prestor. She transformed into her massive black dragon form right in the middle of the throne room, slaughtered Windsor, and sparked a massive bloodbath before fleeing. In this version of Stormwind, you can see a massive unused portal in the middle of the city. This portal was meant for player housing, but we had to wait 22 years for Blizzard to finally release player housing in the Midnight expansion. It was during this time rumors of a sewer base began, where many players reporting seeing a massive level 50 elite monster called Sewer Beast swimming around Stormwind and killing unsuspecting players. During the Burning Crusade, we didn't really see any big changes to Stormwind. There were only a few changes, like with the addition of decoration to the city during in-game events. And as Draenei became a race of the Alliance, we can see Draenei visitors and quest givers all around the city. The northwest gates to the future harbor were still closed during TBC, and the harbor did not become a playable part of Stormwind until the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch. During the pre-patch, Blizzard finally made the harbor a playable part of Stormwind, but the pre-patch also came with a Scourge invasion. For a few weeks, trading and questing was completely halted due to the constant invasions. More disruptive players spent their days killing innocent players and NPCs. After being away for a long time, King Varian finally returned to Stormwind, and after many successful campaigns in the north, he quickly became the unquestioned leader of the Alliance, completely undermining the Stormwind nobles. But it was in this expansion that Blizzard added the most important place in all of Stormwind, the first barber shop. This quickly became the most visited place in all of Stormwind, despite the Wrath barbershop only being able to change the hairstyle and hair color. But after Lich King's defeat, Stormwind faced an even greater threat, one that almost burned Stormwind to the ground once more. In the Cataclysm pre-patch, the ground would shake and massive elemental rifts would open directly inside the trade district, as the streets were being filled by invading fire and water elementals. And when Deathwing emerged from Deepholm, he destroyed much of the old world and made his way towards Stormwind. Deathwing destroyed a large part of Stormwind, including the Park District that was completely decimated. For most players, the Park District was completely useless, but the Moonwell was filled with sacred water directly drawn from the Well of Eternity at Mount Hyjal. This also was the location for the primary Alliance Druid trainer, and after the Moonwell's destruction, the Druids had to move to a small shack at Olivia's Pond outside the city walls. During Cataclysm, Deathwing would fly across Azeroth, and occasionally flying over Stormwind. When this happened, he would breathe fire and kill anyone who were in the city at the time. In this expansion, Stormwind also got a visual overhaul, updating architecture, statues, fortification, and more military decoration. The Dwarven district was also expanded, adding an auction house and a bank, splitting the player economy across both sides of the city. But this only lasted a few weeks, as most players returned to the trade district. The portal in the Eastern Shrine were added, and the throne room got an overhaul with better assets and retexturing. Another big change to Stormwind was the addition of the graveyard. Here we can find the graves of many who died in Deathwing's initial attack. With the addition of flying in the Eastern Kingdoms, all the rooftops in Stormwind had to be remodeled. And with players flying, you can finally see how Stormwind looks from above. Cataclysm also introduced transmog and void storage, as a small group of NPCs permanently took over a building called the Three Winds. Repairing Stormwind after Deathwing's attack was no easy task, but it started in the beginning of Pandaria. In patch 5.2, we can see the gates and statues being repaired, and the statue of Trollbane in the Valley of Heroes, which had been knocked down in the water, finally stood back up. In the midst of Pandaria, not much has changed in Stormwind. The Park District remains in ruins, but there are some minor changes to the city, like the addition of the Pandarian to the Alliance, with a small outpost that can now be seen, with a big hot air balloon flying above. But when you go down in the harbor in this version, you can see some horde trolls talking to the Stormwind guards. I did not remember why this happened, so I had to look it up, but apparently all the troll leaders wanted to unite the troll tribes and stop fighting to become one, so they can fight against the other races. But Vol'jin refused, and in addition to not wanting to unite all the trolls, he decided to betray his own race and join forces with the Alliance to kill the Amani and the Gurubashi tribes. It was also in Pandaria, patch 5.1, we can see the start of the Brawlers Guild under the Deep Run Thram system. It was an exclusive solo boss underground fight club, and one of the best things Blizzard ever added to Stormwind. At the end of Pandaria, during the Siege of Orgrimmar, we got to see an alternative future of Stormwind, one where Stormwind was burned to the ground and all its leader and nobles executed, but Garrosh Hellscream was defeated and sent to prison. During the Warlords of Draenor, nothing interesting happened in Stormwind, because everyone was busy time traveling.
This is our chance.
But all of a sudden, a portal appeared outside of Stormwind. This was the creation of Yalnu, the final boss of Everbloom, who launched an attack on Stormwind, but he was quickly defeated before even taking a step towards the city. During the Legion pre-patch, players could gain a hidden debuff that allowed them to turn into a massive Dreadlord boss right in the middle of the auction house, turning the entire trade district into a chaotic PvP war zone for a couple of weeks. Again. Following King Varian's tragic death at the Broken Shore, the Park District was finally rebuilt and transformed into Lion's Rest, a massive memorial featuring King Varian's tomb. Because the tomb was built upon the old moon well, they could not just leave the Night Elves living in a small shack outside the city for another 6 years. So they were allowed to relocate next to the giant tomb, but this time with no house, shack or moon well. But at least they have a great view. With the arrival of the Illidari, a camp was set up for the demon hunters directly above the mage quarter, right next to the Slaughtered Lamb Tavern. It was cool looking, but no one went there, so it remained mostly forgotten. During the start of Battle for Azeroth, in the Horde opening scenario, a strike team breaks into the Stormwind stockades to free Saurfang. To create a distraction, the Horde set the Mage Quarter completely on fire.
One would think that the city of stone would be less flammable.
You are a cruel enemy, Zul.
But this seemed to do little to no damage to the city. Later in BFA, Tedrasil was burned, and many Night Elves fled to Stormwind. We can see how tents were set up where many of the surviving Night Elves lived. Built on the far northern outskirts of the city, this entire new subzone was created to gather all the racial leaders and act as an unlock hub for the allied races. It was in BFA that we got the greatest quality of life overhaul since the addition of the harbor. The interior of the Mage Quarter's Wizard Sanctum Tower was transformed into a spacious, instant hub that brought almost every scattered portal in the city to one single room. This made traveling across Azeroth easier than ever. In BFA, we yet again got another alternative future for Stormwind, but in this timeline, it had been completely overtaken by Netsoth. And in this version of Stormwind, we can also see Sewer Beastling, referencing the Stormwind legend of the Sewer Beast. In the Shadowlands pre-patch, the Brawlers Guild, after being forgotten but still running in the background for years, was finally shut down for renovations. But this just meant that after years of neglect, Blizzard just gave up on the Brawlers Guild. During the Shadowlands pre-patch, right before Anduin was kidnapped, the Scourge zombie plague returned to Stormwind streets for 2 weeks, but this time not as dramatic as previous expansions. Players who died turned into aggressive ghouls who could attack and infect NPC vendors, auctioneers and other players. During the rest of Shadowlands, not much happened because everyone was gone. The thing that did change was the barbershop. Exactly 12 years after the barbershop's initial release, the Stormwind barber learned some new tricks, like being able to change the druid forms, and even change the gender of the characters. Because King Anduin Wrynn was kidnapped by the Moss Storm at the start of the expansion, High Exarch Turalian was appointed Regent of Stormwind. In Dragonflight, nothing interesting happened. The Dark Fire Amulet was stolen and later destroyed. And they added the trading post with monthly rewards. The thing you might notice is that the game now has that modern look. And when looking side by side, you can see big differences between the modern game and the classic Stormwind. In patch 11.2.7, the Brawlers Guild was revived from the dead with a surprise comeback. And it's still active to this day with new bosses and events that are scaled to level 80. A cluster of 5 brand new portals was added directly behind the Stormwind Embassy. This change opened up instant access to allied race hubs for all Alliance players, regardless of what race they're playing. But I do think these portals look a bit weird. And as of 2026, there are still no major changes to Stormwind. But after the Blizzard developers confirming that they're working on a remake, it makes sense. Now we don't know how big this remake is going to be. Maybe it will look something like the Cataclysm remake, or maybe they will just upgrade the textures, or maybe it will be a complete overhaul. But one thing is for sure, no matter how much they change Stormwind, we will always remember how Stormwind used to be.